Hello, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Shar and we're gonna do my March and April wrap up. I swear I've been calling it my April and May wrap up in my head since planning this entire video, but it's March and April. In the months of March and April, I've read 22 books in total, so let's talk about it. If you're new here, I always like to start off my reading wrap-ups with reading statistics, especially because this time around I skipped March and combined it with April, so I'm gonna go in and tell you all about my reading and my stats for my reading, starting with my ratings. Now, I read 22 books in the months of March and April, but I only have ratings for 21 books. Somewhere along the way, I messed that up, and I don't know which book I didn't rate, but bear with me. So I'm going to tell you the 21 books I remember rating. So I had 3 5-star reads, 10 4-star reads, 5 3-star reads, and 3 2-star reads. Overall, pretty great reading months. The majority of my books were 4 and 5 stars, so I'm happy to see that. In terms of page count, in the month of March, I read 3,588 pages, and I read 17 books specifically in March. I was doing a lot of reading for videos, and I was reading a lot of manga. So my average book length in the month of March was 239 pages. In April, I read 2,697 pages, but I only read 7 books in the month of April. So my average book length in April was much longer at 385 pages. I mentioned in one of my TBR videos that I thought April or March was going to be like my high fantasy era, and I was very much correct, which is why my reading for April, my book length, was much longer. For formatting, which means just how I read the book, I read 10 books digitally, meaning I read the ebook. I read 7 books physically. I listened to 4 audiobooks, and I had 1 book that was mixed media, which just means I was listening to the audiobook for part of it, and then I was reading the book digitally for the other part. In March and April, the majority of the books that I read, I got from the library, which was really fun, but also means I made almost no progress in my reading goal of reading more of the books that I own. Of the 22 books I read last month and the month before, 9 of those books I got from the library. 3 of those books I listened to on Scribd. 6 of those books I read on Kindle Unlimited, so definitely made my KU comeback. 3 of the books I owned, and 1 of the books I listened to on Audible. Overall, it was a really great reading month. I'm happy with what I was able to accomplish. I feel like reading 7 books in a month is like relatively low for me, just because of my like natural pace of reading, but I was traveling for half of the month in April, and I was still reading that. It's just I was reading my very, very long books while I was traveling, which is why I would have 1 or 2 weeks where I only read 1 book. But let me tell you about the books that I read. I'm just gonna go in reading order. So I started off the month of March with this video where I read a book a day every day for a week, and here are the books that I read. I started with Argyll's Resonance by Ruby Dixon. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notebook. I really enjoyed this book. This is set within the Ice Planet Barbarians world, and in this story we are following, if you're new here, I don't remember the names of any fucking character at all. Ever, unless their name is in the title. So just stick with me. We're following this woman who finds herself awake on a spaceship on this planet. She's immediately kidnapped to this cave, and while she is in this cave, she runs into another prisoner there, and this is about them coming together and escaping this cave and figuring out what exactly is going on. Obviously, it's set within the Ice Planet Barbarian world, so we are talking about aliens, and we are talking about resonance, which is almost fated mates within this environment. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it overall like a 4 to 4.5 star rating. The next book I read for this video was Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey, a book that I mistakenly thought was like a horror thriller. I think it's classed as like a climate thriller, or climate, not thriller, definitely not. climate horror. I would say it's more literary fiction. In this story, we are following a woman who is living at the end of the world. Essentially, we talk about mass extinction of every single animal that has not been domesticated and is not being bred specifically by humans. They have all gone extinct. Our girl is at the end of her, I guess her rope is what I want to say, but that's not accurate. She's just kind of done with everything. She's done with life. She's done with everything. But her final mission is to track the migration patterns of these birds. She manages to enlist this boat and this crew of fishermen to take her to track the migrations, but my girl is keeping secrets, and those secrets come up while she is on the boat, and the crew discovers more about her past. You can see why I would think that was a thriller. It's about her history, her story, her grief, the things that she does to cope, the end of the world, humanity's destruction of all life that is not human, or the animals that people eat. And it is incredibly sad and made me cry, but I did love it. It was a 4-star read for me because I felt like some things definitely came out of the blue and my expectations were just not set accordingly. With that said, the writing was absolutely beautiful and I did have a good time with this one. And I listened to How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, one of my most anticipated releases of the year. In this book, we are following 2 siblings whose parents have just passed away. They go to the funeral. These 2 siblings really butt head. There is kind of an argument about inheritance. They both end up inheriting this house. I'll say that. And the house is haunted. It is full of very creepy dolls, very creepy puppets, and it's supposedly haunted by their own history as well, and the family's history. The audiobook for this was really good. It reminded me a lot of Slappy. If you don't know who that is, then don't worry about it. But if you know who Slappy is, you know why that may not be a good thing. But I did really enjoy this. As always, I feel like it was very true to Grady Hendrix's writing style, which is very comedic horror, almost camp in some ways. I like the puppet elements. There were definitely some creepy scenes, but I was not as scared as I felt I could have been, and I wanted it to go a step further, which is why this was a 3.75 star read for me. The next book also within this video that I read is While We Were Dating by Jasmine Guillory. This was my second attempt with a Jasmine Guillory book, and so happy to tell you that it worked so much more, and I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. In this book, we are following Ben and Anna. Surprisingly, I remember their name. Anna is a famous movie star. She is vying for an Oscar and she's trying to get that for herself. And then we have Ben, who is an advertising executive, and he gets this campaign where Anna is the star, where they're filming a campaign shoot for this cell phone. And these 2 have an instant chemistry. They kind of explore that together. They start fake dating as a publicity stunt for Anna, but of course, fake dating leads to real feelings. This was so much spicier than I was expecting it to be. I was like, how many sex scenes there were, but I did really love this book. I love Ben's vulnerability. We have a man who goes to therapy. Ben and Anna are struggling with anxiety in their own ways. Ben has a very complicated relationship with his family, and these 2 just comfort and love each other, and it's very sweet, and I loved it. And the communication here, they actually communicate like adults, and we don't have stupid miscommunication for things that don't make sense. There is miscommunication, but it's more, I would say, not an alignment of what they were both looking for and a reluctance to be vulnerable, as opposed to something stupid that doesn't make sense. I read Sweat and Soap Volume 8 by Kanetsu Yamada. This is a romance manga that is all about this couple. It is the 8th book in the series, so I can't tell you too much about it. Just know that this couple is together and they both work for the same company. That's how they met. They work for a soap manufacturing company in very different departments. She's in accounting, he's in product development. They fall in love. This is their company retreat, and this is about the advancement of their relationship and what they both want for the future now that they're about a year into the relationship. It's very, very cute. I love this series. It's just so wholesome and so comforting, and I had a great time with this. It's one of my favorite books that I've read in the series so far, and I gave this 5 stars. Another anticipated book of 2023, it's Mystery of Thorn, Manor by Margaret Rogerson. This is a sequel novella to A Sorcery of Thorns, we are back with Elizabeth, Nathaniel, and Silas. Because this is the sequel, I can't tell you too much about it. The sequel is their happily ever after of sorts, but it's also a setup and a hint that there will be a full second book. I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's ever been officially announced, but where the book leaves off and the involvement specifically of our demon character Silas is very interesting. I'm hoping that this book eventually goes in the poly direction and we get a throuple, but because of how things are set up, I'm doubtful that it will officially become poly, but that is what I'm thinking. I enjoyed this, although it felt childish at times and a little bit too much like a fairy tale. Overall, I felt it was like a pointless sequel. It was just a setup to the actual sequel that I will not be surprised if it does get announced. While I enjoy being back with Nathaniel and Silas and Elizabeth, this wasn't really necessary. It could have been a couple of paragraphs in the next book and we would have got the same story. And the final book that I read in this reading a book a day every day for a week is Being Merry by Mika James. This is a sapphic story. It is a sapphic novella about a nurse who at Christmas time moves to a new town. She does not yet have a place to stay, and her friend's sister gives her a place to stay. Her friend's sister really hates Christmas. These two have a little bit of a grumpy sunshine enemies to lovers thing going on. I gave this book 2 stars, which is a shame because I liked another book by Mika James that I listened to I thought was really good and was also sapphic. The reason why I didn't like this is because it's grumpy sunshine in the way that I fucking hate grumpy sunshine, and that is when one of our characters is just extremely toxic and borderline emotionally abusive. And I just felt like our main character, our supposed love interest, was not a fun person and really treated our character like shit. So I was not rooting for them to fall in love. I was rooting for our heroine of sorts to open her fucking eyes and realize this was a bad match, and that never happened because they got their happily ever after and it was very rushed and very unrealistic and I did not like it. Then we move on to the second video that I did in March, which was trying to find like my perfect romance manga and dipping my toes into the world of romance manga, especially because I only have about 3 volumes left of Sweat and Soap. So I started with Cutie and the Beast by Yuhi Azumi. I apologize if I mispronounce that. I also can't read my own handwriting. Cutie and the Beast is the story of this pro wrestler, right? He is a big, strong, burly dude. He thinks most people don't find him attractive. And one day he gets this very beautiful, very kind letter from a fan. And he actually responds to this fan. And this fan is this absolutely stunning, beautiful, gorgeous girl who loves pro wrestling, and her type is big, burly, strong men, and this is about them meeting and forming their relationship. I would want to tell you that it's cute, but I'm going to spoil something for you. So if you haven't read Cutie and the Beast and you want to read Cutie and the Beast, skip this section. There are timestamps in this video. Spoiler bar here. Our female character is in high school. She is, I believe, 17 years old. She is in high school. This man is almost in his 30s. Now, he does have a problem with her being a teenager. That is the main conflict of this book. Does that stop them? No, because supposedly they are soulmates. While this was very well written, I cannot get behind a minor and a almost 30-year-old man. In fact, I think she might be 18. Either fucking way, she's in high school. She is in high school. She is a student, and it immediately gave me an ick. I feel like there could have easily been enough conflict with him being a mega famous pro wrestler and her just being a regular girl out and about in the world and having conflicts within that because their friend groups are very different. But instead, the conflict revolved around her being, I don't want to say a child, but she's in school, and not in college, I mean in school. And I was just like, for that reason, I cannot love this book. I gave it a low 4 star, and I would love to continue with the series, but I have to come to terms with this situation and where it's gonna go. And I read Nameless Asterism by Kina Kobayashi. This is also a manga. The next few books I'm talking about are a manga. I picked this up because It's pitched often in like the summaries of it as like a poly book, because we have three friends, one who's in love with this one, who's in love with this one, who's in love with this one, and I think they all somehow end up coming together, or at least that was my hope. I gave this book 3 stars, and if I'm being honest, it's probably more of like a low 3-star or a high 2-star. It was difficult to follow. I couldn't go with the plot. I didn't understand who was who was in love with who, and why they were in love with who, and it was just a very difficult manga to follow plot-wise. And also I spoiled it and read the review, so I know where the story is gonna go. So I was like, we're gonna leave that there. I had a good enough time with it. Then I read the Backstagers, not for this specific video. This is just how Goodreads arranged it for some reason. But the Backstagers by James Tynion IV. This is a story, a queer story about this group of people who work for their theater club in high school, and we have a new student who is joining in. But the thing is, in this theater club, there are people who like do the set work and all that kind of stuff, the backstagers and the actors, right? And this student who we are following joins the Backstagers. But what's behind the stage is like this crazy Narnia like world where it is literally portals to other worlds and hallways that lead to like magical creatures. It's very magical realism, and I did enjoy that aspect of it. There's also some horror in there, which I thought was fun. Not in like scary horror. This is definitely reading more like young YA or even middle grade, even though they're in high school. And I really enjoyed it. It's very, very, very cute. I love the plot of it, but I only ended up giving it 3 stars because while I enjoyed it, at times it was a little bit too ridiculous for me, and I wanted more individual time with the character. And I read Cheer Up, Love, and PomPoms by Crystal Fraser. I loved this book. Okay, in this book, we are following a girl who people don't really like. She kind of sticks to herself. I wouldn't say aggressive, but she's very defensive. She doesn't really like talking to people, and she's hoping to get into a university. And she's talking to her high school counselor who's like, you're not gonna get in anywhere. You have no extracurriculars. Yes, your grades are exceptional, but you're not involved in anything at all. And her mom forces her to be a cheerleader. She joins the cheerleading team where the captain is this trans girl, and it's just like very found family with the cheerleading team and how they support each other. But we're also following our cheerleading captain and her story of what it's like for her to be openly trans, to be the first trans cheer captain, how people support her, but also how they unintentionally kind of ostracize her and make her feel bad, and the pressures for her feeling like she has to perform femininity. And it is a little bit of a romance. These two have a thing going on, and I fucking loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I'm so glad I picked this up. It was such a fucking good time. It's very quick. It was on Kindle Unlimited. I'm not sure if it's still on Kindle Unlimited, but if it is, you should read it because it's a great time. And I read I Hear the Sunspot by Yuki Fumino. This is another manga. I Hear the Sunspot follows 2 boys who are in university. One of the boys is deaf, and he runs into the other boy who's just like very poor, very hungry, and the main character offers this boy a job as his like note taker for classes, and this is about their relationship and how they develop it. It is gay, so eventually feelings start to develop, but in volume 1 it's just about them meeting each other. I did enjoy this, but I didn't love it for the same reasons I didn't fully love Nameless Asterism, and that I felt that the plot was sometimes hard to follow. It wasn't as bad. You could still follow it. It follows a very linear path, but I wasn't as involved, and I didn't fall in love with the characters. That connection was never established, even though I thought that they were very cute, and I loved knowing more about their stories and their struggles, especially our main character who's deaf and what it's like for him to move around the world being deaf, and when he lost his hearing and how that really affected and changed his life, the things that he has refused to do, the things that he now has to do. I read A Sign of Affection by Sue Morishita. A Sign of Affection follows a young girl and a boy. Both of these people are in college. When our girl is on the train one day, she gets asked a question by someone, but she's deaf. So he's asking her a question and she doesn't really understand. She ends up meeting our hero of the story. These two form a connection. She has an immediate crush on him. He's like this world traveler. She's super impressed by him. He knows so many languages. They strike up a friendship, and that's really all this main first book is about. It's them striking up that friendship and how they meet and how she feels about him. Very cute, 3 stars. Happy Marriage by Maki Inoji. Another manga. This is also a romance manga that I read in that romance manga reading vlog where I read romance mangas for 24 hours. In this book, we are following a girl whose family is in debt because her father is an idiot with money. From what I understand from the story, that's literally how it's like described. He doesn't use those words, but that's how it's described. She is working at this company, but she also has a night job where she's not exactly a stripper, but it's maybe like more escorty, but there's not sexual stuff. A gentleman's club, shall we say. She works at like a gentleman club. And when she's there, she runs into this man who is literally such an asshole that she like yells at him and gets fired. And the next day she gets called into her boss's office, and guess who her boss is? As it turns out, her boss is the like head of the company, but his grandfather owned the company before him. And in order for him to be the head of the company, he has to fulfill his grandfather's wish, which is that he marries this girl. And the reason that is that the grandfather was like best friends with the girl's grandmother, and he wants to support her, so they have to get married in like a marriage of convenience. She gets money that helps absolve her family of debt, and he gets to be the head of the company. And this is all about their antics and their first few weeks of marriage. It does get very steamy eventually. In this stuff, we have some things that can border, but it doesn't ever get explicit. I wish I liked this more. The reason why I didn't fully love this and my rating was only like 3-ish stars, somewhere between 3 and 3.5, is because our hero is a little bit of an asshole. He was a jerk and I didn't really like him. And I felt like we were supposed to believe in their chemistry and connection, but it felt forced and inauthentic. And I was like, why do I care that they're together? I don't. So that's that. The 15th book that I read, and I believe this is the last book that I read in March, is A Soul to Touch by Opal Rain. This is the 3rd book in her Dusk Walker series. In this book, we are following Mayumi and we are following Kitty. Kitty is a Dusk Walker, and if you don't know what that is, think a 7-foot demon who eats people. And when Kitty was a little girl, she was delirious with fever. She had lost her cat and she was running through the woods. By the way, this is like an apocalyptic world. People are fucking struggling because they're being hunted the fuck down by demons. So she is running through the woods. She's delirious with fever. She runs into Kitty, who she thinks is her cat. So in her delusion, in her deliriousness, she runs up to Kitty and she's like, oh my gosh, my kitty cat, and gives him a hug because he has the skull of a cat, as you can see. Instead of eating her, because she's like 4 years old, he feels very protective of her, so he just takes her back to her house where no one is. She leaves her on the front porch and then like runs away and checks on her for every few years. Kitty does that, and now Mayumi is an adult. She's in her mid to late 20s at this point. She is a hunter, but she has left the Hunters Guild, so it's just her in her cabin alone, and she gets the sense that something is watching her. She's right, it's Kitty. And this is the story. He gets a new name, don't worry. This is just a name he took on because that's what she called him when she was 4. This is about their relationship and them coming together, and you think it'd be Mayumi having a problem with a big old demon, but it's not, because Mayumi is a self-proclaimed monster fucker. This book is almost 600 pages long, and the majority of that is them literally having sex. I loved it. It was 5 stars for me. Well, not exactly. It was 4-ish stars, somewhere between 4 and 4.75. The reason why I can't fully give it 5 stars is that this is a monster book in the truest sense of the monster book, and I apologize if the lighting is changing. A storm is literally rolling in. I'm watching the whole sky turn black right now. It's a monster book in the truest sense of monster. And that even for me, someone who reads monster romance, I was like, this is a lot. And Bessie, some of the things that you're saying almost border on bestiality. And I hate saying that, but it's true. it does almost border on it. And that's made me very uncomfortable. So I can't give it a perfect 5 stars, but Kitty and Mayumi have the cutest fucking relationship. The problem was not Kitty, by the way. Yes, he looks like this, but his mannerisms, his intelligence, his thought process, it's very clear. And also his background, which I can't tell you more about. Kitty is not an animal, okay? He's just a different species. We'll just leave it at that, okay? We leave it at that. On to April, and the first book that I read in April, very much influenced by Chandler from Chandler Ainsley, is Meaning Mille, a sapphic romance on Kindle Unlimited. It is set in Oxford. In this book, we have 2 timelines. We have these 2 women who met when they were freshmen in college, and you follow that story of their friendship. And then we have the present time, where it is over a decade later, and you know that these women have stopped speaking. It is a romance about them, but it's also about their individual lives and their individual struggles, what led to their friendship dissolving, and the things that they have done to accidentally hurt each other, or rather unintentionally, the things that they've done to hurt each other. I really enjoyed this book, but it wasn't perfect for me. It was a 3.75 stars. While I loved Millie's relationship with whatever the other girl's name was, I thought it was very cute, and I love the emotional depth of this story. I found that our other character was very self-involved and very unaware of how her actions hurt other people, and very much focused on refusing to accept her responsibility and her role for how she also hurt other people. So that was why it was a 3.75 star. Then I read The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi, which I'm so glad that I did, because it was a book club pick, and I have a hard time doing that. So I did actually read this book. I listened to the audiobook on script. The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi is the story of a pirate, a retired pirate. Amina, when this story starts, is in her 50s now, I believe. She is a mother, and she is retired from piratehood, but she has a very notorious reputation as the Nahuda for this crew. No one actually knows who she is or like what she looks like, and she's essentially just legend, until one day this very wealthy older woman tracks her down and offers Amina and her crew an obscene amount of money to track down her granddaughter who has been kidnapped. That's what this story is about. It's about their sea adventures and them on a mission to save this girl, and of course it's also rich in mythology. You can hear the wind. The storm is very much arriving, so I'm trying to speed this up. It was cute. I loved it. I give it 4 stars because there is an aspect of a trope that I don't like and I wish was handled better. And also Amina's adventures at times felt a little bit disjointed, not too much at all, because there is still an overarching storyline for where they're going, and you know what the ultimate goal is, but there are some side quests in there that can make this feel a little bit disjointed, but still love this. It was a very strong book, and I definitely recommend it to anyone who is interested in pirate adventures. Tell you what I rated that. It was like a 4.5 star for me. Then I read The Bride Test by Helen Huang. To be honest, this is a series I never actually planned to continue, because while I did read The Kiss Quotient, I didn't love The Kiss Quotient, but I was part of a readathon called The Fates and Favorites for Riley's Patreon, where you get matched with someone who has the most similar reading taste to you. You'll see that reading vlog when I was traveling, and my match picked The Kiss Quotient, but I had already read that, so of course I had to continue with the next book, which was The Bride Test. In The Bride Test, we are following, I know her name is Mai, and she changes her name to Esme when she moves to America. So we're following Esme and we're following Kai. Wow, I remember their names. So Esme is in Vietnam when Kai's mother comes, and she's working at this hotel, and she sees this like long line of girls coming into the bathroom crying and leaving, and that is where she meets Kai's mother, and Kai's mother is looking for a bride for her son, and Esme gets the role. Even though she wasn't applying for it, she does, and she can't turn on the opportunity, so she comes to America to be with Kai, who had no idea what the hell his mother was doing, but has no choice but to like at least give Esme a place to stay while she's there for the summer. Of course, they fall in love, and this is their story. I did really enjoy this. I gave it 4 stars. The reason why it wasn't 5 stars is that I felt like some things were unexplored, and especially the ending, I felt like we skipped over some really major plot points and focused too long on things that they needed the attention, but they got the majority of the attention, which means that other aspects of the plot and the story that also needed attention didn't get it. So I hope that makes sense. But I did love this book so fucking much. I gave it 4 stars, and I'm so glad that I read the second book. If you're curious, no, I will not be reading The Heart Principle, and that's because I know that book is very, very sad, and I don't want to cry, so no. I read Bound to the Battle God by Ruby Dixon, a recommendation from you all, which I have to tell you right now, I fucking love this book. In this book, we are following someone whose name I have already forgotten. She is hearing these noises from her neighbor's apartment, so she's calling her landlord, and she's like, yo, what the fuck? Whoever you moved in here is like literally so aggressive. They're yelling and they're shouting, and the landlord is like, nobody lives there. That apartment is fucking empty. It's not livable. It has to be renovated. And she starts feeling like she's losing her mind because she can hear it. She's trying to record it, but when she records, this doesn't pick up any sound. It's completely silent. So she's hearing it. So one day she breaks into the apartment because it's like loud drumming and this guy's shouting, and she breaks in to see what's going on, and she gets transported to this other world. And I've never read Game of Thrones, but from the reviews, people say it's very like Game of Thrones like. Okay, she gets transported to that world, and within the first 5 minutes being there, she gets forced into slavery, where she is going to be sacrificed to this battle god, and lo and behold, this battle god appears, and she's forced to be his anchor, which is essentially his guide throughout his time in the human realm. My girl is fucking lost and confused because this isn't her world. Gods don't exist. She's like, I'm from Chicago. And people are like, shut the fuck up, because she's a woman. It is absolutely chaotic, but I did really love this book. It is high fantasy. It is definitely high fantasy. The romance is there. I would say it's a good balance between the politics, the fantasy, the mythology, and the romance and the steam, because it is Ruby Dixon. I had a good time with this. I love their relationship. It definitely gets better as you go along. This is a book that Ruby Dixon wrote over the span of several years, so you can see her writing improve throughout it, although her writing is always very good. And I had a great time with this. I gave this 4.5 stars or something like that, even though this book is almost 700 pages long. I'm not kidding. Then I read Xeni by Rebecca Weatherspoon, also for the Fates and Favorite Readathon. It was one of the prompts to read a book off the master list. That was a 5-star prediction, so I chose Xeni. Xeni by Rebecca Weatherspoon. As I mentioned, in this story we are following Xeni, and Xeni's aunt has just passed away. Xeni is at the funeral, and she gets the news that her aunt has left her everything. The house, all of her money, everything, and the secrets that the family has been keeping. In order for Xeni to inherit these things that have been left for her, to claim them, she has to get married to a man that her aunt has picked out, which is her aunt's like friend, this Scottish musician. And he agrees because one of the things that the aunt left him, if he fulfills this aspect of her wishes, is $100,000, which he needs because he has a debt that he needs to pay off. This is about them coming together, Xeni finding out more about her family and her family secrets, and navigating the grief that they're both feeling for losing this very important person in their lives. And also, they just have an instant chemistry. They have a lot of sex. There's pegging and fisting and anything else that you can picture. Both of our characters are bisexual, and I just freaking love this story. They find a lot of love and comfort within each other. It is very steamy, but it is a very, very good time. And again, I really enjoyed that balance of exploration of grief and anger and resentment, and also the more lighthearted moments of her just getting to know this man and really coming to love this man, and it is very, very cute. Then for the Literally Dead book club, I did really good with reading book club reads this month. I read The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. This is a very weird story about a group of women who are invited to a writing retreat by a famous feminist horror novelist called Rosa. And Rosa is doing this writing retreat for the first first time. 4 women get invited. Our main character ends up getting a spot because her friend submitted a story on her behalf, but lo and behold, she also submitted a story on their other friend's behalf, Ren. Now, Ren and our main character, whose name I've forgotten, Alex. Ren and Alex used to be best friends, but they had this very dramatic fallout and they are trapped together at this writing retreat, essentially ignoring each other and competing for the publishing deal of a lifetime. But this house is creepy and Rosa is erratic, and we quickly find out everything is not what it seems, and perhaps some things are too good to be true. This goes off the rails. This is chaotic, but I loved it. I love the writing. I love the darkness of it. It is very unsettling. I didn't love every aspect of it, but I did enjoy it. And also it's very queer, like very, very sapphic. And I just had a good time with it. I gave this 4 stars. And another Literally Dead book club pick. This one was for March, but I couldn't get to it in March, so I finished it in April. And that is the Spitehouse, which I used for the 24-hour readathon that Ashley from Ashley's Little Library was hosting. So I read that during that time. Spitehouse by Johnny Compton is the story of this young single father who is on the run with his 2 daughters, Des and Stacy. We don't know what they're on the run from. We just know they're on the run, and the father has to do a lot of under the table jobs. He sees this ad in Texas for someone to live in this spite house and just record any paranormal activity. He can't turn on the opportunity because it's a lot of money for him, and can set up his daughters for the future and make it so they can have more stability from whatever they are running from. And of course, the house is actually haunted. I love a haunted house story, but this story did fall flat for me, and that it wasn't as scary as it could have been. Going back and forth between timelines was at times confusing, and I didn't fully understand the motivations of some of our characters. Not the father. I get the whole needing money and safety for your children, understood why he would do it, but the twists and why those people would be the villain and why they would have that much power and why this very wealthy lady would want to do this, what the point of it was, that was unanswered. And by the end, I felt like I had more questions than answers. And while I did enjoy this and will read from this author again, it was not the perfect read for me. I gave it 3 stars, which seemed to be the consensus amongst the Literally Dead book clubbers. And that's it. I've been recording for 45 minutes, but that is every single book that I read in the months of March and April. It's very funny because one of my reading goals was also to keep better track of the books that I DNF'd. I DNF'd multiple books throughout these 2 months, but I have no idea which ones I did. With that said, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you aren't already, please do subscribe before you go. It just helps me out a lot as a creator, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!